The moment the nurse handed me the allergy test results for my 3-year-old son, my hands went cold. Blood type A. That single letter felt like a punch straight to my chest. Because my husband and I, we were both type O. There was no universe in which our biological child could be type A, not one. But before I could even finish processing it, my mother-in-law, Barbara, snatched the paper from my hands with the speed of someone who had been waiting her entire life for proof I wasn't good enough for her family. She stared at the words, her eyes bulging, her lips curling into a vicious smile. And then she screamed, "You're the worst! This isn't our son's child. We are all type O." She threw the paper onto the floor as if it were filth she couldn't bear to touch. I stood there frozen, my heart pounding so loudly I felt it in my ears. But not because she was accusing me. I expected that part. It was because I suddenly understood something far beyond her imagination, something she wasn't prepared for. But she kept going. "I knew something was wrong from the beginning," she shrieked. "You cheated. I knew a woman like you could never give my son a child." Her voice echoed through the pediatrician's office, and parents in the waiting room turned their heads. I felt the familiar sting of humiliation creeping up my spine. She had always done this, belittled me, blamed me, insulted me. When James and I struggled to conceive for years, she told me to divorce him for his sake. When I started IVF, she said I was forcing an unnatural pregnancy. And when I finally got pregnant, she accused me of lying for attention. Her cruelty wasn't new. But today, I wasn't the same woman she used to crush. I slowly bent down, picked up the crumbled test result, and smoothed it with my thumbs. And then, as if something inside me finally snapped into place, I looked at her and smiled. A calm, almost eerie smile. "You're right, Barbara. This is not your son's child." The room went silent. Her triumphant smirk froze. My husband's eyes widened. For a few seconds, no one breathed. Then she hissed, "I knew it. I knew you," but I raised my hand gently, and she went quiet. "No, you misunderstand completely." I turned to James, who looked terrified, confused, and pale, then back to the woman who had tormented me for years. "James is not your biological son." Those words fell between us like a bomb. Her eyes twitched. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. What are you talking about?" she whispered. I didn't answer her yet. Instead, I looked straight into the camera of my own life, the invisible audience I always imagined watching my pain, and delivered the hook of my story. Before I tell you how that one sentence destroyed my mother-in-law's life forever and revealed the truth she had hidden for 32 years, make sure you subscribe, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my child, and myself. My name is Emily Carter, and this is the story of the day my mother-in-law tried to destroy me, but ended up exposing her own darkest secret instead. When I looked back at Barbara, she had gone completely still. "Explain," she demanded, but her voice, usually sharp enough to cut glass, was trembling. "Do you remember our IVF tests?" I asked quietly. Her face drained of color. Of course she remembered. She hated IVF, called it unnatural, sinful, a waste of money. She even refused to accompany James to a single appointment. When we did IVF, the clinic tested both James and my blood types. Mine is O, like you already know, and James, according to his report, I pulled out the folded paper I had kept hidden for years. His blood type, A. Her voice cracked. That's impossible." I didn't blink. "You and Dad are both type O. Genetically, you cannot have a type A child, which means James isn't yours. He was switched, either by accident or," I paused deliberately, watching her face collapse into panic, "or by you." My father-in-law, who had been standing quietly by the corner, finally stepped forward. His face looked like stone, but his eyes, there was something breaking behind them. "Barbara," he said, in a dangerously calm voice, "is there something you need to tell us?" Her hands began to shake. She gripped the back of a chair for support. This isn't true," she stammered. "Hospitals make mistakes. Blood types aren't reliable at birth. They change. They change all the time." "No, they don't," I replied. I could feel my heartbeat slowing, my fear melting. For the first time in years, I had the truth. I had the control, and she knew it. Suddenly, she pointed at me, desperate. "This is a trick. You're doing this to distract from your cheating, to save your marriage. James, don't listen to her." But James wasn't listening to either of us. He was staring at the report in my hand like it was peeling his entire identity apart. "Mom," his voice cracked, "why does my blood type say A. You always told me I was type O. You said it when I was a kid. Every time we filled out forms, you always said O. I thought maybe I remembered wrong. No, my father-in-law's voice boomed through the room. You told the doctor during his appendicitis surgery 10 years ago that he was type O. You were sure. The color drained from Barbara's face completely. James sank into a chair, running both hands through his hair. If I'm A, I'm not biologically related to either of you. Finally, Barbara broke. Not softly, not gracefully, but like a dam that had been cracking for decades. I did it for us, she screamed, and the room went quiet again. James looked up slowly. Did what? Mom? She covered her face with her trembling hands. Her lips came out small, terrified, unrecognizable. The baby I gave birth to wasn't breathing. I thought he died. I panicked. I couldn't lose another child. My entire body cold. Another child? What was she talking about? James stared at her like she was a stranger. What do you mean, another child? What happened? Her lips trembled. I switched you. I switched you at the hospital. I took someone else's baby. I thought God was giving me another chance. My father-in-law staggered backward, as if someone had punched him. James looked like the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. But the worst part wasn't her confession. It was the look in her eyes. She didn't regret it. She regretted getting caught. And I knew from that moment forward, this story was far from over. For a long moment, no one moved. Barbara's confession hung in the air like poison. Thick, suffocating, impossible to escape. James sat completely frozen, staring at his mother as if seeing her for the first time. His lips parted, but no words came out. He just kept shaking his head, slower and slower, like each movement made the truth heavier. My father-in-law, Richard, leaned against the wall, clutching his chest with one trembling hand. "Barbara," he whispered, "tell me you didn't do what I think you're saying." She didn't answer him. She didn't answer anyone. She just collapsed into the nearest chair and let out a sound that didn't even feel human. A mix of sobbing and hysterical breathing. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anger. I only felt the weight of understanding settling inside me. All these years, her cruelty, her desperation to control James, her irrational hatred of me, her obsession with being a perfect mother, her fear of losing him, everything finally made sense. James slowly stood up from his chair. His voice was barely audible. "You switched me with another baby? You stole me from someone else?" Barbara choked on her sobs. "I didn't steal you. I saved you. You were going to die. My baby was dead. Do you understand? They put him in my arms and he was cold and blue and I just broke. I broke, James." "Mom," he said, emphasizing each word painfully. "I am not your baby." That sentence shattered something inside her. She lunged forward, grabbing his hands like a drowning person grabbing a lifeboat. "You are. I raised you. I loved you. I protected you. Blood doesn't matter. You're my son, my only son." James didn't pull his hands away. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just stood there staring at her with a hollow expression. Finally, he said, "You lied to me my whole life." His voice cracked, but he forced himself to keep going. "You lied about everything. About my childhood, my medical history, everything. Do you understand how dangerous that is? What if I had needed a transfusion? What if I did it for love?" She screamed. No, it was my voice this time. Calm, steady, clear. She whipped her head toward me, her eyes wild. "You did it for control, not love. Love heals. Love protects. What you did was not love." James lowered his head. He didn't defend her. He didn't defend me. He was too shattered to defend anything. I stepped closer to him, placing a gentle hand on his back. He flinched, not from me, but from the world suddenly collapsing around him. "James," I said softly, "there's something you need to understand." His eyes lifted slowly to mine. There was fear in them, but also trust. I continued. "The test results, the type A blood, our son's blood. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a lab error. He swallowed hard. What are you saying? I'm saying he is yours, I whispered. A wave of confusion crossed his face. But I'm type O, he said weakly. I shook my head gently. No, James, you're not. The IVF clinic tested your blood. You're type A, the same as our son. The realization hit him slowly, then all at once. His shoulders sagged. His breath shook. A tear slid down his cheek. Then he really is my child. He's really mine. I nodded. My throat tightened. For a moment, we both forgot Barbara was even in the room, until she exploded again. No! She shrieked, slamming her fists against the desk. You will not take my son from me. You will not take my grandson either. He's the only family I have. Richard finally snapped. Your grandson? Barbara, you have destroyed everything. You took another woman's baby. You lied for 30 years and you're still acting like the victim? She stood up so abruptly the chair crashed behind her. How dare you judge me? You never cared. When our first baby died, you weren't even there for me. You were out drinking with your friends while I was in a hospital bed holding our dead child. Richard's face went pale. That is not fair, he said, voice trembling. But what I did saved us. I gave us a child. I gave you a son. You gave me a lie, he whispered back. Barbara's eyes darted between us, frantic, desperate. She suddenly turned to me. This is your fault. You want to ruin my family? You always hated me? You poisoned my son against me. I stared at her in disbelief. I didn't poison him, I said quietly. You did that all on your own. She lunged toward me, her face twisted with rage, but Richard grabbed her arm. Enough, he growled. You will not touch her. James sank back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. I could feel his entire world falling apart. I knelt beside him. James, I whispered, look at me. He lifted his head. His eyes were red-shot, his voice barely a breath. What am I supposed to do, Emily? My whole life is a lie. My mother, my childhood, my identity. His voice broke. I don't even know who I am anymore. I took his hands gently. You're the man I married. You're the father of our son. Nothing changes that. He exhaled shakily. But before he could respond, Richard spoke again. Barbara, you need to tell us everything. Right now. The truth. All of it. Her eyes darted again. Her breathing grew wild. And then she said the words that changed everything. Again. You want the truth? She spat. Fine. I'll give it to you. She pointed at James. You were never supposed to find out. But if she wants to tear this family apart, then I'll tell the whole story. She looked directly into my eyes. Your husband wasn't the only baby involved that night. James and I froze. What does that mean? He asked shakily. Barbara's lips curled into a haunted, bitter smile. It means the baby I lost was not the only child I switched. My stomach dropped. James stood up, shocked, furious. What do you mean another child? What did you do, Mom? Barbara closed her eyes, a sickening calm settling over her. I didn't just switch you, she whispered. I switched 2 babies. Richard stumbled back. James grabbed the edge of a table to steady himself, and I felt my entire body go cold because suddenly I knew this story wasn't about blood types anymore. This was about crimes buried for decades, and the truth wasn't just devastating, it was horrifying. For a moment, it felt like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. James stood motionless. Richard staggered backward until he hit the wall. I felt my knees weaken beneath me. Barbara's words echoed in my head. I switched 2 babies. She said it with a strange calmness, almost proud, almost relieved, like confessing was freeing her from a burden she had carried for too long. But in reality, it was placing that burden on all of us. James's voice finally broke the silence, sharp and shaking. What do you mean 2 babies? What exactly did you do? Barbara closed her eyes as if she were replaying the events in her mind. When my baby died, she began slowly, I panicked. I thought the world was ending. I couldn't face going home without a child. I couldn't face telling your father that I failed again.
Richard flinched. Barbara, losing a baby isn't failing. But she cut him off. You wouldn't understand. You never understood. You never felt what I felt. The doctors were taking the babies to check their vitals, and then her voice dropped to a whisper. I followed them. James's face twisted with horror. You didn't. I didn't plan it, she choked. I just walked. I just watched. And then I saw another woman in the hall holding her newborn, unconscious from the medication. And the baby wasn't crying. The nurse said he was weak. They were worried he might not make it. A cold shiver ran through me. My mind was piecing things together even before she finished. I told myself, Barbara continued, staring at nothing. I told myself that if I switched them, no one would know. My dead baby would be found in that woman's room, and her weak child would become mine. They'd assume he was mine. They'd think he just deteriorated after birth. James took a step back, shaking violently. You switched a dying baby with another dying baby? Barbara nodded, tears streaking down her cheeks. I thought if I loved him enough, he'd live. I thought God was giving me a second chance. And he did live, James. You lived. James slammed his fist onto the table. You lived because you stole me from someone else. You ripped a child out of another woman's arms. Do you have any idea what you did to them? Barbara collapsed into her chair again, sobbing uncontrollably. I know, but I couldn't lose another baby. I couldn't. Richard spoke with a trembling voice. Barbara, you said 2 babies. What about the second switch? What child are you talking about? She wiped her face with shaking hands. There was another child who wasn't doing well. Another mother, another room, another baby who wasn't crying. I thought, if I switched him too, maybe both would survive. My breath caught. My stomach twisted painfully. Where did you put that baby? I whispered. Barbara stared at me. Into the wrong crib. James's eyes grew wider with horror. So you didn't just steal one baby, you caused 2 families to raise the wrong children. She nodded, whispering so softly we almost didn't hear her. Yes, I changed their lives forever. Both families. I don't know what happened to the other baby. I never looked back. Richard ran a hand over his face, devastated. My God, Barbara, what have you done? James turned away from all of us, leaning on the counter as if he might collapse. I grew up thinking I was part of this family. I grew up thinking you were my mom. My whole life, my entire identity, it's a lie. Barbara fell to her knees. I am your mom, she pleaded. I fed you, I held you, I stayed awake all night when you were sick. You're my kidnapper, James said quietly. His voice, calm, low, and cutting, was somehow more frightening than any anger. No, she cried, gripping his leg, but he stepped back sharply. I don't know who I am. I don't know where I come from. I don't know my real parents. I don't even know if they're alive. And someone else, another man, has been living the life I was supposed to have. I touched his arm. James, we'll figure this out. We'll find the truth. He turned to me, eyes filled with pain. I don't even know how to be a father right now. How am I supposed to raise my son if I don't even know who I am? You are his father, I whispered. Blood type doesn't define that. Love does. He swallowed hard, nodding faintly. But the torment in his eyes didn't fade. Barbara suddenly stood up again. A strange, frantic energy filled her posture. No one can know about this, she said sharply. James blinked. What? No one, she screamed. Do you understand? If this gets out, I could go to jail. They could arrest me. Everything I've built, my reputation, your father's career, everything will be ruined. Richard snapped. Barbara, your reputation? You're worried about that now? She grabbed her purse desperately. We can't tell the police. We can't tell anyone. No one needs to know. We'll just bury this. We'll pretend it never happened. James let out a hollow laugh, one that didn't sound like him at all. Pretend? I've been pretending my whole life. I'm done pretending. Barbara stepped toward him. James, listen to me. If you report this, they'll take you away from me. They'll test everyone, they'll dig into hospital records. That's exactly what needs to happen. For the first time in your life, you're going to face consequences. Her face twisted. You're choosing her over me? She shouted, pointing at me. She poisoned your mind. She wants to destroy our family. I stepped back, stunned. Barbara, Richard said, you destroyed this family. Just then, our son, little Noah, peeked into the hallway, rubbing his sleepy eyes. Mommy? Daddy, are you mad? James broke instantly. He rushed to Noah and picked him up, holding him tight, his tears falling freely. Nobody. Daddy loves you so much, more than anything. Barbara watched them, something dark flickering in her eyes. For the first time I realized, she wasn't just broken, she was dangerous. James held Noah close, but his eyes lifted and locked onto mine. In them, I saw fear, I saw anger, and I saw determination. We need answers. We need to find out who I really am. I nodded. But the moment we agreed to search for the truth, Barbara finally snapped. You're not going anywhere. If you dig into the past, I'll lose everything. I won't let you do this. She lunged toward us, and that's the moment everything changed again.
Barbara lunged toward us so suddenly that for a moment I couldn't even react. 1 second she was across the room, eyes wild and unhinged, and the next she was rushing straight at James and our son, her hands out like claws. Noah, run! I shouted instinctively, but James moved faster. He spun his body to shield Noah, holding him tightly as he stepped back. Barbara's hands slammed into his shoulder instead of our child. She stumbled, almost falling, but caught herself on the edge of the table. Give him to me, she shrieked. He's my grandson. James's voice cracked from a place I had never heard before. Broken, terrified, furious. You don't get to touch him, he said. You don't get to be near him ever again. Barbara froze. The words hit her like physical blows. You can't say that to me, she whispered. I'm your mother. No, James said quietly. You lost the right to call yourself that. Before she could lash out again, Richard grabbed her arms, pulling her back. Barbara, stop, he roared. Look at yourself. Look at what you're doing. But she fought against him like a trapped animal, kicking, struggling, screaming. She turned him against me. She took my son, and now she wants to take my grandson. I'll lose everything, everything I built. I stepped forward and spoke in the calmest voice I could manage. You're losing them because of what you did. She whipped her head toward me, hatred burning in her eyes. You destroyed my family. I shook my head. Your secrets did that, not me. Barbara suddenly went still, too still, and then she smiled. A slow, chilling, eerie smile that didn't belong to someone sane. You think you've won? You think taking James from me is victory? You think uncovering the truth will make him choose you? James stepped back, still holding Noah tightly. Mom, stop. But she ignored him. Her eyes were locked on me. You want to know who James really is? She asked softly, almost sweetly. You want to know where he comes from? Her smile widened. Then you should know I lied more than you think. James stiffened. What are you talking about? Barbara leaned against the table, her body shaking, her voice low and venomous. You think I only switched the babies? You think the truth is as simple as finding your real parents? She paused long enough to make my chest tighten painfully. You have no idea how deep this goes. James's breath hitched. Mom, what did you do? She tilted her head. I didn't just switch the babies that night. I destroyed the records. Richard gasped. You, what? She nodded. I burned the identification tags. I paid a nurse to change the logs. I bribed a clerk to remove certain files. I made sure no one would ever know there was a switch. James felt like he was turning to stone beside me. So,
You made it impossible to find my real family? He whispered. Yes, she said calmly. I made it impossible for anyone to take you away from me. James closed his eyes as tears began to fall. Barbara wasn't finished. And the other baby? She said softly. The one I switched a second time? The weak one? My heart began pounding. What about him? I said. Barbara looked directly at me. He survived, she whispered. He was adopted. And the couple who took him, they couldn't have children of their own. They lived in a small town outside Denver. I blinked. How do you know that? She smirked. Because I helped arrange it. James stumbled backward, horrified. You kept track of him all these years? Barbara's expression softened into something twisted and tragic. I needed to know he lived. If he died, then what I did that night would have been for nothing. She took a crawling step toward us. I watched him grow from a distance. He went to LinkedIn High. He liked basketball. He had a scar above his eyebrow from falling off a bike. He looks like you, James. A suffocating silence fell. James asked the only question anyone could ask. Why did you tell us this now? Barbara wiped her eyes. Because you forced me, she said quietly. You backed me into a corner. I had to show you how much you stand to lose if you expose the truth. My stomach twisted. She wasn't confessing out of guilt. She was threatening us. James, she said softly, if you go to the police, you won't just destroy me. You'll destroy him too. The boy who was switched a second time. He'll get pulled into investigations, DNA tests, trauma, court hearings. Do you want to ruin his life? Do you want to tear apart a family who loves him? James's lips trembled. His grip tightened around Noah. I could see a war inside him. Anger versus guilt. Truth versus fear. Barbara stepped closer. You expose this, and you'll hurt innocent people. People who have nothing to do with what happened. Is that what you want, James? He shook his head, confused, tormented. I don't know. I don't know what to do. And then Barbara made her final move. You don't have to do anything, she said gently. I can fix this. I can make this disappear. Just stay quiet. Stay with me. Stay with our family. She looked at me with a cold smile. And maybe tell your wife to back off. James finally snapped. He pushed her backward. Not violently, but with finality. No, he said. I'm done letting you control my life. And I'm done letting you manipulate me. Barbara's face twisted with rage. You'll regret this, she hissed. You think she will stay with you after this? After learning you don't even know who you are? You think she'll raise a child with a man whose entire identity is a lie? James's voice shook, but he stood firm. She's the only one who has ever stood by me. Barbara screamed, a raw, animalistic scream that echoed through the house. Richard grabbed her before she could lunge again. Enough, he shouted. Barbara kicked, screamed, cried, completely unrecognizable. James looked at me, breathing heavily. His voice was barely a whisper. We need to leave, he said, before she hurt someone. I nodded, heart pounding. He held Noah close and reached for my hand. We walked out the door, but deep inside I knew this wasn't the end. Barbara wasn't finished. She was going to come after us, and the darkest secrets of James's past were only beginning to surface.
The moment Barbara fainted, the room turned into chaos. James and his father rushed to her side while I stood frozen, not because I didn't care, but because the truth had finally crashed into the open, loud, undeniable, irreversible. The weight of every secret, every manipulation, every insult she had ever thrown at me suddenly felt meaningless compared to the storm she was now forced to face. They lifted her onto the couch. Her breaths were shallow, her skin pale.
For a moment, I wondered if she genuinely fainted or if this was another one of her dramatic escapes from accountability. But her trembling hands told me this wasn't an act. The truth had clawed its way into her reality, and it terrified her. She opened her eyes slowly, as if waking up into a nightmare she couldn't run from. Her gaze darted around the room until it landed on me, wide, broken, desperate. "This can't be true," she whispered. "It can't be." I didn't respond. I wasn't the one who owed explanations anymore. James knelt beside her, his jaw clenched, his eyes filled with a mixture I couldn't quite name: anger, disbelief, grief. "Mom," he said quietly, "tell us what happened." Her lip quivered. She looked at her husband first, then at her son, and finally at me, the woman she had spent years tearing down. "When I married your father," she began, her voice barely audible, "things were complicated. He traveled a lot for work. We tried for a baby, but nothing happened. I was young, scared, ashamed. I thought he deserved better, and then—" She paused, as if the words physically hurt her. "I made a mistake, a terrible one." Silence swallowed the room whole. I was only with him once, the other man. I told myself it meant nothing, but when I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. I convinced myself it had to be your father's. I buried the possibility. I buried it so deep, I started believing it myself. My breath hitched. Even though I had expected something like this, hearing it aloud felt jarring. James's father stood slowly. The calmness on his face frightened me more than if he had shouted. "So you lied to me for 32 years?" he said quietly. Barbara leaned forward, reaching for him. "It was a mistake. I was scared. I didn't want to lose you." He stepped back. She froze. James's expression hardened. "And you spent my entire life criticizing me for every small thing, making me believe I wasn't enough, and then you did the same to my wife." I swallowed. His voice was breaking. I had lived through Barbara's cruelty, but I had never fully understood the wound she had carved into her own son. "You tried to destroy our marriage over a blood test, while hiding something like this?" She turned to me, as if pleading for some kind of mercy. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought if I could keep my family perfect, everything else would stay together." I finally spoke. "Your definition of perfect was built on lies." Her shoulders sagged. Tears spilled down her cheeks, more unstoppable now than her denial had been minutes ago. James stood up. His voice turned cold. "We need space. All of us." Barbara reached out toward him. "Please don't leave me." He shook his head. "I'm not leaving you. I'm stepping away to breathe." Her father-in-law cleared his throat. His voice cracked. "I think it's best if everyone goes home for now." I didn't argue. I picked up our son, gathered the papers, and walked toward the door. Before I stepped out, I turned briefly, just enough to see Barbara curled into herself, small and defeated. For years she had tried to make me feel that way. I didn't feel triumph. I felt finished. When we finally reached home, James collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. Our son slept in his arms. I don't even know who I am anymore. Everything I believed about my childhood, my family, it feels fake. I sat beside him, placing my hand over his. "You're still the same man. You're still the father of our child. You're still my husband." He lifted his head, his eyes searching mine. "Are you angry with me?" I shook my head. "You were manipulated your whole life. I'm not angry with you." He looked away. "I'm angry with myself. I let her treat you like that. I didn't protect you. That's her doing, not yours." He exhaled shakily. Then he pulled me into a long, desperate hug. I felt his body tremble against mine. For the first time since the chaos began, I felt something warm and certain settle inside me. Relief. The next morning, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Barbara standing there, her eyes red and swollen. She held an envelope in her hand. "I'm not staying. I need to say this." James appeared behind me, silent, stiff. "I was cruel to you," she told me. I justified it as worry for my son, but it was selfishness. I wanted control because I felt my life slipping the moment he was born. I took my guilt out on both of you. She held out the envelope. Inside, it was a handwritten letter. My confession. For the family. For medical records. For whatever the future holds. I didn't speak. "Please," she whispered, "don't raise my grandson to hate me." James stepped forward. "That depends on you, Mom. Healing comes with honesty and consistency, not drama, not blame." She nodded weakly. "I understand." For the first time in years, she didn't argue, she didn't shout, she didn't lecture. She simply stepped back, giving us room, something she had never done before. As she walked away, James let out a long, exhausted sigh. "She looked small," he murmured. "She's been carrying a mountain alone. Mountains crush people when they start to crumble." He wrapped an arm around me, pulling me close. "Thank you," he whispered. "For staying, for fighting, for believing in us even when everything felt impossible." I looked at our sleeping son in the crib, his tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. Our family is built on truth, not lies. That's why we'll be okay. James kissed the side of my head. "I love you. I love you too." And just like that, the storm began to quiet. Not because everything was fixed, but because everything was finally honest. Our son would grow up knowing love, not bitterness. James would grow into the man he was meant to be, free from the weight of someone else's secrets. And Barbara, well, she would have to decide who she wanted to become now that the truth was no longer buried. But as for me, for the first time in years, I finally felt like I belonged in my own story. Not as the woman constantly being judged or questioned, but as someone who stood tall, protected her family, and let the truth speak louder than revenge ever could. The lies ended with her, but our life, our real life, began again that day.
Did you like my story? If you listened till the end, drop a number 1 in the comments. If you enjoyed it, you can support me by liking the video and sending a small tip. I've got lots of other life stories like this on my channel, so make sure to subscribe and check them out. I've added 2 new stories on screen that everyone loves. Thanks for being here. See you in the next one. With love.